Hey, Deborah, I have your presentation up. Just let me know when you need to change slides.
Sure. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. Wow, that person that you are talking about is me. So I'd just like to add Argentina to that list of countries that I visited because I went to Argentina earlier this year and it was amazing. So I am delighted to be talking with you today, about wines, introducing you to this delightful beverage that has given me so much joy in my life. Wine is life, and it's something that we should all be familiar with and comfortable with. You know, it's not just for persons who know about it or persons who have a lot of disposable income and can afford to buy it, but it is something that we all will at some point need to interface with. And, you know, the better we understand it, the easier it becomes. So we're walking in the supermarket, we are at dinner, and we get a wine list, or we have to host a group of persons for corporate, and the subject can be intimidating, but that's why we're here, because I'm going to demystify some of the things that one may have heard. So if you do have any questions as we go along, please probably put them in the chat, and I'll address them accordingly. So perhaps Peter could just let me know if there is any question that comes up, and ask, and then I'll answer. Okay. So today we're going to talk about what wine is. What is this thing? We're going to look at the categories that wines fall into, the color of wine, key wine terms. We're going to look at the main grape varietals. That's the next slide, David. And we're going to go through the one after that, one more. Yes, and then we're going to just talk very quickly about wine and food. So what is wine? Anyone want to guess? It's fermented grape juice. Yay! Very simple. And fermentation is a natural process that takes place. It eats up the sugars in the juice, and it creates this alcohol and CO2. So wine, very simply, is fermented grape juice. The grapes that we're talking about are not the table grapes that we buy in the supermarket. It's a different species called Vitis vinifera. And the emphasis for grapes that make wine is more on quality over quantity. So the grapes tend to be quite small, but very intense in flavor. Just for you to know that the countries that are able to grow grapes to make wine are found 30 to 50 degrees north of the equator, where you'll find North America and Canada. In the middle, you'll find Europe. So that mainly is comprised of France, Italy, Germany, Spain, and Portugal. And then to the right side, you'll find parts of India and China that are also making wine and creating their own industry. And then 30 to 50 degrees south of the equator, where we find Chile and Argentina, and the other South American countries that do produce wines. In the middle, we'll find South Africa, and to the right, there is Australia and New Zealand. So many times I get asked the question, can we grow grapes in Jamaica to make wine? Short answer is yes, we could, but the longer answer is no, we cannot, because we fall very close to the equator, so it's way too hot for way too long. And the global weather patterns are really impacting the wine industry. Winemakers are having to find ways to mitigate against this intense heat that lasts for so long. And because grapes need a long cooling time, which helps them to develop the flavor complexities, what we call the phenolics, that you will need the grapes to have to be able to make good wine. All right. So next slide, please. So when we think about wines, any wine that you can think of from anywhere in the world is going to fall into one of three categories. So one click. The first category is still wines, and these wines have no bubbles. They tend to be 8 to 15% alcohol by volume, and in many instances, they're named after the grape. So you'll see the grape name on the bottle. Grape names such as Pinot Grigio, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Malbec, Shiraz, etc. Those are grape names. In other instances, you won't see a grape name, but you'll see a region name. The assumption being that you will know what grape they grow in that region. So on screen, you have the bottle to the left that says Chablis. And that wine is made from the Chardonnay grape, because in the Chablis region in France, in northern France, particularly the region called Burgundy, they grow the Chardonnay grape there. That's their dominant grape. And that, I mean, that style of Chardonnay is amazing, really, really nice, refreshing, crisp, beautiful. And it is a contrast to the American style of Chardonnay that tends to be, oaky and very buttery, vanilla, creamy. So it's a very different style, very interesting. Same grape, produced under different circumstances that will give you a totally different experience. And that's one of the things I love about wine, because you can drink a different wine every single day for 10 years and never drink the same wine twice. And for me, that's just mind-blowing. All right, so another region that you might see on a bottle would be Chianti. And they would assume that that in Chianti, they grow the Sangiovese grape. You will see Rioja, a Spanish wine, and they would assume that that's the Tempranillo. So, some of us would see Burgundy or Bordeaux, and, these names, Chateauneuf-du-Pape, Saint-Emilion, the assumption is you would kind of know what grapes are grown there. Nowadays, they're putting more information about the grapes that that make that wine on the back label, so that consumers can be, more aware of what it entails. So a second category would be sparkling wines. Yay! And sparkling wines have bubbles of carbon dioxide, so they're nice and crisp and refreshing. And so the most popular style of sparkling wine would be champagne. Champagne is this beautiful nectar that is just delightful, and it's quite expensive, as we know. And if the sparkling wine doesn't come from Champagne, it cannot be called champagne. So that's what makes champagne, and that's what makes it so expensive. So let's say you're in California, and in the California region you have a specific area called Napa. And let's say if the wine doesn't come from that specific region, it cannot be called, it cannot be labeled wine from Napa. So Champagne is a very protected region. It's quite small, so that's the reason why the price is where it is, because demand is high and production is relatively low. Then we have Prosecco out of Italy. Prosecco is an awesome sparkling wine too. The style, you do have nicer styles of Prosecco. In many instances, you find the inexpensive ones, they're very popular, but there are some really nice ones that are made to a higher standard. And then we have Cava out of Spain. So we have Champagne from France, Prosecco from Italy, and Cava from Spain. Those are the most popular styles of sparkling wine. There are others, but these are the most popular. And then we have our fortified wines. And fortified wines have extra alcohol added. So they range between 15 and 22% alcohol by volume. And so the wines that we're talking about here are port, which comes from Portugal, and sherry, which comes from Spain. Interesting thing about port and how it started is that the Portuguese wanted to get their wines to England to be sold. And so they would, put the wines on the ship and send it over. But by the time it got there, it would be off. They realized that if you throw alcohol in it, that would preserve it, and it would last the journey to England, and they would have a nice wine to drink. And so that's how they developed the port style and hone that craft. And port is something that we see all the time, and most of us would have grown up with our parents having a bottle of port in the cabinet, and it would be there forever. But I urge you all to experiment with port. The styles have become a little bit lighter, a lot more approachable. They have aged ports, which are amazing. They're great with chocolate. They're great after dinner. They're great with cheeses, and it's just really nice to expand your repertoire. And then there's sherry out of Spain, which is also a beautiful wine. Sherry can be dry through to sweet. And when they're dry, they're really nice wines that you can have with your meal. As they get sweeter, they tend to be more dessert wines or after dinner drinks. So, you know, I urge you to just experiment and, you know, have a little sherry in your life. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in terms of the color of wine, we have our white wines. And these wines can be made with white grapes and occasionally black grapes. And the reason they can use the black grapes is that when we're making white wines, we don't use the skins, we just use the juice. So, you know, when we're making our rosé wines, we use black grapes and we have the juice in contact with the skins for a short period of time so that it extracts a little bit of the color. And then that's how we get our rosé wines. And then the third category is red wines. Yeah, I love a big, bold, beautiful, juicy red wine. And here we use our black grapes. We get color from the skins and this beautiful thing called tannins. So many of us would have had an experience with a red wine where we taste it and it would be kind of sharp and very dry. And we'd say, wow, this wine is bitter. But what we mean to say is, wow, this wine has really strong tannins, or this wine is quite tannic, because our tannins they're part of the makeup of the grape skins. They're found also in the seeds, and they're found in oak barrels too. And they give wines structure and complexity and that kind of grippiness that you'll find when the tannins are present. So they dry out our mouths and they make our teeth and our gum kind of stick together. So it gives you that effect. So, you know, some of the words that you can use to describe your tannins are, you know, they are sharp, they are smooth, they're round, they're green, they're young, they're silky, they're smooth, they're fat, they're, you know, I mean, they're just a whole lot of other words, but we don't want to use the word bitter to be associated with, you know, a wine that we're drinking, because bitter and sour give negative connotations. So when we say those words, the perception is this wine isn't going to be nice. But tannins are great, particularly if you are buying a bottle of wine that you want to put down for aging. It needs to have a good tannin structure, because that's what's going to allow it to stand the test of times. Yay! Any questions so far? Interesting?
Very interesting so far.
Yes, Peter. Anybody else?
Yeah, in fact, one quick thing is that, you know, when you mentioned that champagne only comes from France, from that region,
Yeah.
I remember in the UK, they had a wine made from elderflower.
Yes.
They called it elderflower champagne.
Yes.
And there was a big dispute surrounding that. So now I know.
Yes. So the word champagne is very protected. And so I don't know if anyone remembers, there used to be Andre champagne made out of the USA. Yes. And the French, they fought it, and so they had to change it, and it just became Andre. So they have to, yeah, they are very, very. I don't know if you remember, Peter, there was a drink called cola champagne.
Yes, in Jamaica, absolutely.
Right, in Jamaica, but when it came to the UK, they had to call it cola something. They couldn't use the word champagne on the package.
Okay.
Yes, the champagne is very protected.
Okay.
All right, so if it doesn't come from that region in France, it cannot be called champagne. So France has a whole lot of other really good sparkling wines as well. But, you know, if it doesn't come from within that area that's called champagne, can't call it champagne. Even if you make it in the same style. So Spanish cava is made in the same way. So is South African sparkling wine. They use the exact same method to make their sparkling wines, but can't call them champagne and can't fetch the price.
Okay, that I didn't know, that cava, I mean, and sparkling wine are made with the same method. Okay.
No, not all sparkling wine, you know, cava. The Spanish make their cava in the champagne way, and South Africa, they call them a method champenois or traditional method. So that's just the French style, but they can't call it champagne.
Got it.
Yeah. So when we look at our wine labels, or when we are navigating a wine list and there are descriptions, there are some words that you will see. So I'm just going to take you through some of the more popular or important ones. So acidity. You'll see a description that says this wine has, notes of lemon, green apple, and really crisp acidity. And acidity, it comes from the natural acids in the grapes, and it is very important to give wine balance and its refreshing qualities, because acidity makes your mouth spring water. So you start salivating when you drink a wine that has good acidity, and you feel it. You start salivating. Your tongue tingles, and so that's important, because when you're salivating, your mouth is actually cleansing itself. So it's really good. When you're drinking a sweet wine, if it doesn't have good acidity, it's going to be cloying, because the acidity isn't there to kind of allow your mouth to kind of wash itself. So it will, the sweetness will clog your taste buds on your tongue. I've forgotten the proper word for that, but you know what I mean. All right, so the next word is aroma or nose. So this understanding this and appreciating this is it's like the single most successful thing to do to be able to appreciate your wine. So the aromas or the nose of the wine are the smell components that you will get when you smell your wine. So whenever you get a glass of wine, you really should evaluate it. And by evaluating it, I mean, you look at it, but we hold it up and we swirl it around, and that motion allows the air to pass over the wine so that it opens up and that you are then able to smell it. And it's in smelling it that you are really able to understand the wine. So most professional wine tasters will tell you that they don't need to put the wine in mouth, and they certainly don't need to swallow, okay? Which is why there's a lot of spitting in wine tastings, because if you're tasting, 10, 15, 20 wines, you don't want to swallow, because that will then, give you what we call palate fatigue. So the aromas in the wine is where you get the essence of the wine. So you're going to get aromas from the grape, because each grape will have its own smell profile. And I know you'll be thinking like, there are, however, thousands of grapes. Don't they all smell? Thousands of like red grapes. Don't they all smell the same? Actually, they all don't smell the same. They smell similar, and there are, certain, there's a set of aromas that you can expect to find, but then there are the different nuances. So in Jamaica, we use the analogy of mangoes. So, if you think about the different types of mangoes, and what should I use? Maybe apples is a more widely understood. So there is Granny Smith, Golden Delicious, Red Delicious. I can't remember anymore. In Jamaica, I would just roll off some mangoes. But just know that each of those apples, even though they're apples, they all have a different taste profile and smell profile. Okay. And that's the thing with grapes, that each one has its own smell and taste profile. And the more you study and understand them, then the easier it becomes. But if you're looking at a red wine, there will be a certain set of aromas that you can expect to find. And, there's a thought process that you follow. But aromas, or the nose of the wine, is simply the essence of the wine. It is important to be able to enjoy your wine, because most times we get our wine and we just pick up the glass and start drinking. No, and we should never pour our red wine to the, close to the top of the glass. You really just want to pour to just above the shoulder of the glass, all right? Because when you do that, then you will have enough space in the glass to be able to swirl it. And as I said, that is the critical thing to do to be able to enjoy your wine. So you do need to smell it. You don't have to smell it before every single sip, but you certainly want to smell it at the beginning of the glass. It's somewhere in the middle of the glass and toward the end, because as the wine sits in glass and is in contact with the air, there is, it's changing, it's opening up more and more and more, and relaxing and just presenting its best self to you. Okay, so next is the body of the wine, and this speaks to the weight of the wine on your palate. So the body of the wine can be light, it can be medium, and it can be full or heavy bodied. So just think about skim milk, half and half, and full cream milk. And in that regard, your wines do have similar kind of weight profiles, all right? Next, dry. And when we talk about a dry wine, we're talking about a wine that has no sweetness present when you taste it. Very simple. So in wine speak, the opposite of dry would be sweet. Okay, next. The finish of the wine speaks to how long the flavors stay in your mouth after you've swallowed. So if it's a light-bodied wine, it would tend to have a short finish. A medium-bodied wine would tend to have a medium finish, and a full or heavy-bodied wine would tend to have a long finish. So that means when you swallow, you know, the flavors, if it's a light-bodied wine, the flavors are pretty much gone when you swallow, okay? Next is tannins. We spoke about those earlier. Anybody remember what I said?
The skin?
Tannins?
The flavor you get, this, no, not sour. You said not to use the word sour.
Yeah. So it's the feel that you get. So the tannins, the tannins are a part of the makeup of the grape skins. They're also found in the seeds and in oak barrels. They give wine structure and complexity. So tannins are something that you feel. Okay. Next is varietal, and varietal is the type of grape. So Chardonnay. So when we're speaking about wines, we don't say variety, we say varietal. So it's the Chardonnay varietal or Sauvignon Blanc, Moscato, Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, Shiraz, Malbec. Those are varietals. Okay. And the last one is vintage, and vintage is the year that you'll see on the bottle. So 2022 or 1965 or 1978 or etc. And the vintage speaks to the year of harvest of the grapes that made that wine, okay? Not the year that the wine was bottled. So the vintage speaks to the year of harvest of the grapes. That's important to note because for wine collectors, they watch like the weather reports, the climate reports, and they are looking for the information about the conditions that govern in a particular area. And you'll hear people saying that 1993 was a good year, and what they mean by a good year is that all the elements that go into producing the perfect grape aligned, and it was a good year. And of course, if you have like the perfect grapes, then that wine should be like the perfect wine.
I have a quick question, Deborah.
Yes.
Sometimes you hear people say the wine is old. It's gotten bad. Can you explain what that is?
It's old or what, sorry?
The wine has gone bad.
Okay, awesome.
Because of the length of time you've had it.
So, it's interesting. If the wine is bad, it indicates that it either wasn't stored properly, or for whatever reason, the wine is off. And when it's bad, if it's a red wine, you're gonna get this kind of vinegar smell. It's going to have this orangey kind of very dull look to it. And when you taste it, well, you're not going to want to taste it, because by looking at it and the smell of it, you're not going to want to taste it. And if you do taste it, then it's going to have this very what's that word, like acetone, that kind of feel on the palate. So you definitely don't want to taste it. But if the wine, an old wine, so we're in 2023, so a wine from 1975, or let's say even more recent than that, a wine from 2000, well, that's 23 years. So a wine from 2010, 13 years, that's an old wine, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not good. I mean, we had a 1983 and a 1975 quite recently. And because they were stored under really good conditions, the wines were still really nice to drink. So, but what happens over time is that the wine changes. So if you had tasted it when in 1975, for instance, it would be a totally different wine to what you're going to taste now in 2003. But you do have wines that can last that long and longer. So
Oh.
those wines need to have a really good tannin structure. You can't buy a wine off the supermarket shelf and put it down for 25 years because you're more than likely going to have vinegar at that point. There needs to be a certain quality structure to the wine for it to be able to stand up that long. So your distributor or your local wine shop, whoever is there should be able to tell you which wines that they have that will be able to be put down for any period of time.
Okay, got it. Thanks. Mhm.
All right, so the main grape varietals, and we'll just look at 4 for the white, or Pinot Grigio. Love me a Pinot Grigio. And in Jamaica, where it's nice and hot, this is my 11 o'clock wine. Champagne or Prosecco or Cava would be my breakfast wine. So it's my champagne time now, guys. So Pinot Grigio gives you a dry wine, light to medium bodied with notes of green apple. There's something kind of florally. It has medium acidity, and Pinot Grigio does not spend time in oak. So it's a really nice, light, refreshing wine that's perfect, with your chicken sandwich or your chicken salad or your fish, your fish dishes, etc. Nice, easy drinking wine. Next is our Chardonnay, which is also a dry wine, tends to be medium to full-bodied, medium to high acidity. You're gonna get notes of golden delicious apple, citrus such as lemon, and you'll get notes of like lychee, melon, pineapple, tropical fruits. And most times Chardonnay will spend time in oak. If the Chardonnay has not spent time in oak, it would say unoaked Chardonnay. So the Chardonnay wines tend to have really high acidity, so they need to spend time in oak because the oak will bring down the acids, and it facilitates this kind of creamy, buttery, vanilla note to take place, to infuse itself into the Chardonnay to make it a lot more approachable and easy to drink. Our Sauvignon Blanc is also a dry wine, medium bodied, high acidity, citrus notes of lime. So here we're getting limey notes versus the Chardonnay where you're getting more lemon notes. Something herbaceous that reminds us of asparagus, or that smell you get when you cut the grass, so that fresh cut grass smell. Notes of green apple, and sometimes it'll spend time in oak. And if it spends time in oak, they call it Fumé Blanc. Okay. And then I'll just mention Moscato because it's a very popular style of wine that lots of persons enjoy. A sweet wine, it's medium to full-bodied. It has a very aromatic nose, and the notes that you get when you smell this wine are that of honey, honeysuckle, rose apple, tropical fruits such as lychee, apricot, peaches, medium to high acidity, and it doesn't spend time in oak. Any questions about these grape varieties or any varietals or any other white wine varietals? No? Okay. So the main red grape varietals are Pinot Noir, dry wine, light to medium bodied. You get red fruit notes here of like cherries and strawberries. The tannins tend to be soft, and our red wines definitely are going to spend time in oak, and the oak will impart these toasty, smoky, vanilla, chocolate notes, biscuity kind of notes to our wine. So when we're smelling, if you smell something that smells oaky, woody, then you'd expect that because our reds do need to spend time in oak so that the oak can soften those tannins. The next style would be our Merlot. And our Merlot is also dry, tends to be medium to full-bodied. You get red and black fruit notes here, so plums and blackberry, medium tannins, and it will spend time in oak, so you're going to get those characteristics also. Next is our Cabernet Sauvignon, my favorite. Dry wine, quite full-bodied. Black currant is the dominant note here. Hints of blackberry and other black fruit. You're going to get something leathery, smoky, toasty, chocolatey. The tannins here are heavy, they're big, they're bold, and it will spend time in oak. So you're going to get those, smoky characteristics. And then I'll just mention red blends. Red blends have been made in Europe for a long time, but those red blends, like if you see Bordeaux on a label, it's a red blend. It's generally made up of Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot, but they would include some like Syrah, Malbec in the blend. But the red blends that we're seeing nowadays tend to be are very different, and they tend to have a hint of sweetness on the back end. So they tend to be medium sweet through to sweet, and you get this jammy fruitiness to them. The black fruit notes are present, so like, you know, blackberry and black currant, black cherry. The tannins in the nowadays red blends are quite smooth because the sweetness is there, so it smooths out the tannins, and they would all spend time in oak, so you would get the oaky notes to the wine as well. So the red blends would mean that they are made of more than one varietal. Okay. All right, so our final slide for this morning is where we talk about wine and food. So, you know, wine and food is like gastronomy heaven. So you'll have a dish that tastes really good, and you'll have a wine that tastes really good, and, you know, you have them independently, and yeah, all is good. But there are times when you put the two together and it's like kapow, what we call foodgasm. It's just like awesome. And for me, I guess that's another reason why I just love this whole experience, because for me, you know, dining is an experience from a simple breakfast through to the most complex dinner. It's an experience. And if you understand the dynamics of wine and food, it makes it a lot more interesting. Additionally, you know, what I encourage is for you to just experiment, just have fun with it. You know, there are no rules. You can drink white with your steak if you want, because it can work. And I've had some really good experiences doing that. So the whole idea is just to have fun. Okay. So with our seafood, so a crisp Sauvignon Blanc is great. If you have like something fried, so like calamari, you know, a nice Sauvignon Blanc, because of the levels of acidity that will cut down the perhaps oiliness or the fattiness of a dish like that. If you were having, for instance, a steamed fish, yum, yum, nice, buttery, creamy, pumpkin, okras, and so on. You know, a Chardonnay works really beautifully with the creamier seafood dishes. So it could be an Alfredo kind of sauce on the seafood. A Chardonnay will work nicely with that. And if you're just having some tossed shrimp or grilled fish, then a glass of Pinot Grigio. And if you wanted a glass of red, then a Pinot Noir would be a nice choice to have with your seafood. Next up, we have our chicken. Chicken is a heavier meat than seafood. So a nice glass of Chardonnay, a Pinot Noir, or a lighter style of Merlot could be a good choice. Next up, it's pork or veal. Oh no, spicy foods. So spicy foods, and we're talking about pepper spice. And you know, spicy foods, the pepper will make your tongue a lot more sensitive. So a Riesling that's medium sweet or through to sweet, Moscato or a sparkling wine, the bubbles in the sparkling wine will help to soothe your tongue if you're having something spicy. If you wanted red wine, I find that Pinot Noir, Chianti, or perhaps a lighter style Merlot could work also. And a sweet red. That, you know, you're not going to go wrong with a sweet red, because again, the sugar is going to, you know, kind of massage the tongue. So pork or veal, heavier styles of, as we're going along, the meats are getting heavier. So Merlot or Pinot Noir, a heavier style Pinot Noir, or Sauvignon Blanc or Chardonnay. So this would now be dependent on the kind of sauce or gravy or spices that one uses to cook the meat that would determine which wine you would go with, okay? And then we have our lamb, yum, big, bold, flavorful meat. So it can work beautifully with big, bold, flavorful wines. So our Shiraz or Cabernet Sauvignon, Zinfandel, Malbec is also another really good choice. And if you want it, I mean, I've had lamb with Riesling, and it's been amazing. So as I said, you know, just, and I like to work outside the box as well, and just experiment and have fun. What I urge you, ladies and gentlemen, is that if, you know, please don't say, you know, oh, I don't drink white wine, or I don't drink red wine. what I would say is you probably haven't found the white or red wine yet that you really like, unless, of course, one of them makes you sick, because some people can have an allergic reaction to wine. And so if that's the case, then sure, don't drink whichever one it is that would cause that. But in many instances, what happens is that, we get served a red wine. It's not served at the right temperature. It's probably not even as young and fresh as it could or should be. And we taste it and we're like, Lord of mercy, I don't like red wine. And we just write it off. But no, I mean, the styles, there's so many styles now that you can challenge me to find you a style of anyone, red or white, that you're not only gonna like, you're absolutely going to love. All right, so with steak, big, bold, flavorful meat, Cabernet Sauvignon, those tannins are gonna work beautifully with the fattiness in the steaks. Malbec or Shiraz, Zinfandel will work too. So, just try different ones and, find one that you love. Do you have a question, Mike?
No, I'm good.
Okay. And so with desserts, there are, styles of wine that the wine industry makes. So there's ice wine, where the grapes are left on the vines until the first frost comes, and then, the grapes are frozen and they harvest with the ice on the grapes, and they make this delightful nectar of the gods. Late harvest, where the grapes stay on the vine for longer than they would normally stay, and so they develop more sugar content, and they make a wine with that. Sauternes, out of France, is grown in an area where it's very, very humid, and they cultivate this thing called the noble rot, which is a fungus. And I know it doesn't sound too cool, but actually Sauternes are amazing wines. They're really, really beautiful, and they have this amazing flavor that is made because of that noble rot that is on the grapes, and they harvest and they make this beautiful wine. And then there's Moscato, which we know. So these wet wines work really well with most desserts. And then if we're having chocolate, I mean, if a lot of evenings after I eat dinner, well, I am a dessert person. I love something sweet after I eat. And so I'll just break a piece of a chocolate bar. And usually I would be having a red. So my Cabernet Sauvignon, my Malbec, my Shiraz, they work well with like a piece of chocolate. But port is a great wine to have with most chocolate desserts. And then, and port is also amazing with cheese, for those of us who like to finish on a savory note. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my presentation to you this morning.
Debra, one quick question. I know we're pressed for time now. We're almost at the end. But
Yes.
Someone just asked, what are vegetarian dishes?
What about them?
Vegetarian dishes, what do you have with it?
Oh, it just depends on the dish. I mean, most reds are going to work beautifully with vegetarian dishes.
Mm-hmm.
And, if you're doing something pumpkin-based, for instance, you could have a white wine, rosés. We didn't talk a lot about rosés, but, in the same way you can have a multi-course non-vegetarian meal, you can have a multi-course vegetarian meal paired with different wines. So it just depends on the dish. I do it all the time because, I like eating vegetarian, actually.
We've got time for one more question.
Certainly.
No, this is not a
Hi.
question, comment.
Okay, woman, go ahead.
Hey, Neville, you go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes. Just quickly, in terms of so many red wine brands which are on the market, all of them claiming to be like Merlot and this and that and the other. For example, you're talking about Yellowtail and Barefoot and Sutter Home and all of these things.
Yes.
What's really the difference there?
So the
Yes.
difference, pardon?
Yes, go ahead.
So the difference would be the brand style. So it's the same Merlot grape grown. So let's say all of us took mango and we're going to make mango juice. We're all going to make it a little bit differently. Okay, so once the bottle says Merlot, it's Merlot, but it's how each winemaker would decide to express his version of the Merlot.
Okay.
All right. So you take your Merlot grape and you grow it all around the world. Because of the climatic conditions that prevail in every single area being different, the fruit is going to express itself just a little bit differently depending on where it comes from. And so each person that gets the fruit that they have grown is going to, their style of wine is just going to be a little bit different. When you're buying at the level of the brands that you mentioned, to be honest, their focus is more on usability. So they want to make those styles of wine are very user friendly, which means that they kind of have a little hint of sweetness. So they're all very, very similar. And then it's just really the power of the brand that makes those different. But as you get into the finer styles of the wine, then the expressions are a little more different, a little different, and a little more nuanced and very interesting.
Okay, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
So, Debra, thank you very much indeed for a fascinating presentation. I said at the start that you know, your 30 years plus of experience really shows you really know your wines. And you know, I will not remember half of this because you just had so much detail, very useful. If people want to watch this, it will be on our YouTube channel, be up there by tomorrow, so you can go remind yourself about the food pairings and or the different styles of wine. So Debra, on the screen there is a virtual certificate of thanks. I will email a copy of this to you, and you can put it up on your wall or whatever you want to do with it.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me. And if you do have any questions, you may email me or call me. No problem.
Thank you.